Hello. So I said 20 minutes and it will be 20 minutes. Good night, everyone. This is radio host MC Leo from the South American Rome, and I've been thinking about a bunch of cool stuff, and I don't know how to start sharing my ideas with the audience. I think that this model of a video, a podcast, I don't know if we can call this a video, but certainly at least a podcast, because I'm trying to make it frequent, and it's a cool word. is working, right? This format is working, that's the point. And so I'm going to make a few comments on the isochronic music that I've been listening to, and I can tell you that you have to really look for good stuff out there to make sure you have something that works. But usually that's the case, and I've seen that some people are mixing isochronic with music, and I think that could be effective up to a point. Certainly, if you're just basically listening to music with a very subtle, very background and unnoticed isochronic tune, I'm sure it's not going to be as effective. And I've seen some of the tunes on this channel on YouTube called Jason Lewis. Yeah. Lewis in the News, no, it's another one. Jason Lewis, and he did a video where he pretty much had the brilliant idea to oscillate on the isochronic tune, and probably he's not the producer, probably he's just trying to get as many views as possible. And what would happen is the isochronic tunes would fade out and fade in. And in order for this to be effective, you have to be aware of the isochronic tune all the time. And so I don't think it's a good idea to try anything else. It's great if it works. It's great. I'm sure that it will work. And so maybe I should do it on my video, just so I can get an impression. Maybe it will affect the content of the video. Maybe it will affect the ratings of the video. You know, one thing about this, another comment is that you cannot be bipolar about this, as in, and that's an introduction of one of the subjects I'd like to talk about, by the way. You cannot be bipolar about such things like stimulants and isochronic tunes or whatever. By the way, it's not isochronic tunes, it's isochronic tones. It's tones, not tunes. I don't know if there's a difference, if it's just a formality. I'm going to say tones now, sounds better. And the point here, you cannot be bipolar about it. For example, I'm not against hedonism, but many of the people who are hedonists are maybe I don't know, maybe a minority. I don't know if it's a majority. I hope it's a minority. Maybe a minority of these people, this kind of people, are really like assholes, and they seem to be mad or pissed about something. And so, would you call someone like that an hedonist? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe he's just I don't know. Maybe he's just lazy, and one of the things that such person does is maybe some drugs or something. But it's not really part of his character. If such person is like an asshole, like a nihilist, you know that movie, The Big Lebowski. It's a fun movie. I know some people don't like it. I didn't like it. But if you really try to find the good stuff in it, you will find something. It's postmodern work. And I know some people get off on the movie because it's the characters are always mad at each other, and there are the nihilists as well. The nihilists, which are the point here in this movie, at least, they are very, they're not good people. They are basically they would be classified as insane. That's what. Everyone in this movie probably is insane, even Lebowski, the main character. He's not the typical or the archetype of a hippie, and even though this movie is kind of pushed down by its fans, you don't have to say that the movie is completely bad, because certainly it's at least something curious. It has some elements that require a thinking, like an analysis to, it yields an analysis. It has some elements of truth. Certainly, it's very comical, in a sense. It's very you can see that whoever wrote the plot in that movie is kind of pushing his characters and his elements in a way that doesn't seem like anything that's real, right? There are real elements in it, but just like a dragon has real elements in it, like a dragon has reptilian features and reptile skin. Probably the element of flight is something that really exists. But you can make something fictitious with a bunch of real elements. This stuff about the nihilists really makes you think, because when you consider that the nihilists are used by traditionalists as an excuse to avoid hedonism. And it's very, very natural to find yourself in a position that that finds mistakes in both sides, right? A third position that has some kind of independent thought and action, independent from the right, independent from the right, and left, independent from the. Let me see. There are other spectrums, like independent from the libertarians and independent from the authoritarians, right? You can see that if they avoid the conclusion that one should really not only help the poor, but make people in general happier. Like, suppose that we were to feed everyone in Africa with like 50% of our spare income, and imagine that in 10 years Africa and whatever other country would have solved its starving issues. In that case, it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be enough to just do that. They could be possibly very much poor and unhappy, possibly in a very depressing way, and it would be arbitrary to stop at some point there. And since we have this basis of morality, and if I really believe that if you're an atheist, it's impossible to have an objective morality, because, for example, if you say that happiness around the world must be maximized as in it must be as high as possible, as physically possible, it doesn't mean that there is a maximum of happiness. It means like let's try to be happier and happier. If you have that position, which is a very popular and I think a very high IQ position, you still have to defend how come you believe that in a chaotic universe where chaotic genes occur, how come you agree that these chaotic genes and these chaotic brains, when fully happy, are going to, when they are satisfied, not fully happy, but when they are progressively satisfied, they're going to be constructive, or they're going to be helpful with each other and whatever. If you really believe that like people are chaotic animals, you in the back of your mind can't be a defender of hedonism, because in the back of your mind you're thinking like, oh man, these people are all like a bunch of apes, and there's no learning, there's no progression to the story if you just give them what they want. But you can say that you believe that in order to get together some political gain, but it's, you have to choose one or the other. Logic falls. If you're going to say that you believe in God and you don't believe in hedonism, that's also a problem. A problem because you have to consider that reality, by that belief, reality is fundamentally good, and it's created in a way that knows that in a way that predicts its own future. It's created in a way that functions, arises, and it's created in a way that pleasure and pain must be equal to good and bad. Right? The idea that they don't necessarily conclude, they don't necessarily, by conclusion, the idea that by any conclusion they don't necessarily are the same, is very much an emotional, learned behavior. I don't want to use the word construct, but it's something that's imposed in society, and it's imposed, and you can see a lot of things that are imposed in society. And the funny part of it is that there's a history of imposed things in society, and you can see that since these things change, then they must not be true, right? They must not be permanent, and they must not be true, because the ultimate sense of truth is something permanent, that's above even physics. Right? It's truth. For example, marrying age. What about the marrying age? 15, 14, 13. What about people's reactions to marriage between 13-year-old girls and I don't know, 25 years old man? That was the common thing in the past, and don't you believe that people in the past had insights that are divine and stuff? Okay, so you believe that, and how come you suddenly change that perspective? How come you were able to hold two different thoughts about the same instance? Sorry, about the same stance, not instance. One thing that really bothers me is that probably is that you spend like 18 years, 20 years, 25 years without knowing that, but then you suddenly realize it, and sure, I guess it's fine to eventually learn it. I guess it's the way things are supposed to be, and I don't know, maybe it's just my mind fluctuating about a position, but eventually people will realize that without our pleasure and pain, in every sense of the word, moral is thrown away as well, right? If you throw away pleasure and pain, you throw away moral as well, and that's my main argument here. So I'm talking a little I'm talking a little vaguely, maybe, about pleasure and pain, but it's because it's supposed to be a general sense, and I think that that's the best way to talk about it. And by the way, why not just go straight to the scientific evidence that says that, for example, if you take away the pleasure and pain, pretty much if you take away just the pleasure response in our brains, you increase the chances of suicide by like I don't know, 90 to 80%. You increase crime because, for example, if you desensitize the brain, the brain response to pleasure, it is likely to have to acquire a big amount of resources for the same feeling, and that may translate into crime. If you're saying, for example, if you're saying that you want a functional argument for the correspondence of pleasure and pain to good and bad, then let me say something. That's the most probably the most interesting of all explanations here. Pleasure and pain define your set of actions and decisions and thoughts, and even thoughts, right, during the day and during the night. And they define in a very functional way what is going to be done and what's going to be avoided. And mostly, you can say that it's all about pleasure in the end, because if you're avoiding something, it's certainly pleasurable to avoid it because you have a relief from the pain. And if you're doing something that's pleasurable, it's certainly, I guess, painful not to do it. So you can just choose one, like it's all about pleasure, it's all about playing, to define human behavior. I'd say that you should choose pleasure because the idea that pain is the thing. I would say that pain is always probably limited in a way that you cannot measure it. You cannot measure pain, but you sure can measure pleasure, I guess. I would say that pleasure must be somewhat infinite, and because of its potential, and pain is not necessarily infinite. And there is also one thing that if you are having pain and you add pleasure, then you end up feeling a relief. As in, the pleasure is the one that creates a creates a dominant stance on this binary situation. But if you're having a pleasure and pain is introduced, it's very much likely that that pain will be reduced and probably ignored. So we can see that there's a dominance of pleasure here. So probably the defining thing here is pleasure, not pain. Okay, so coming back to the argument, if pleasure is what defines behavior, and morality is not about avoiding doing stuff. I think it's effectively about doing stuff, and that's a common mistake, right? Are you a saint if you avoid killing your neighbor? I don't think so. Are you a saint if you avoid, I don't know, fucking your neighbor's wife or something, or doing misdeeds like stealing or so? If you avoid it, it doesn't mean that you're saint. But if you go out of your way to, and if you have pleasure helping people and stuff and creating things working, then you're a saint. And if you think that it's not about saints, then I'm laughing at you. So what defines morality is good deeds, not avoiding bad deeds. its morality is defined by a set of orders, instructions, and active behaviors. And it's pretty much a job. It's pretty much a job. And considering that with a system of pleasure, you have to say that if morality is objective, as in if there is a God, and if it's good to help people, and these are easy arguments, but if you're not familiar with them, you are not likely to understand it. It's very easy to address those. In that situation in which you believe in God and you believe in morality, you have to believe that pleasure in the, happiness is probably the best word, because if you're happy, not necessarily you're having pleasure, right? Some people would be working, and the way these words are commonly used is that pleasure is something that's not related to work. I don't know if it's a good word usage, but that's the way it's used. So I'm just going to say happiness instead of pleasure. And so it's pretty much, if you're defining eudaimonia with hedonistic intention and that morality paradigm, you pretty much have to go that way. And that's my important argument for today.